And Billy, I will go ahead and hand it back over to you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks to Lauren for sort of putting this all together and making the invitations and also being the person that turns the pages and everything else. I appreciate it. So we can go to the slide that says about me. So it's 2 slides ahead, Lauren. Yep, right there. Okay, so I'll introduce myself real quickly. My name is Billy Parker. I'm with Chandler-Gilbert ARC. I'm the executive director at Chandler-Gilbert ARC. I've worked for the company since February of 1994, Valentine's Day of 1994. So I've been here more than 30 years now. I've been in a bunch of different positions within the agency and have become the executive director in 2013. So I'm going into my 11th year as the executive director. I've also been a mobility manager for close to that amount of time. I think 8 or 9 years. One of these days I'll figure that out so that I don't always act like I'm guessing. But I've been doing it for a long time, and always appreciate the relationship that we have with MAG in the city of Phoenix and ADOT and the whole 5310 transportation program. We've been doing 5310 proposals since I started working here. So we've also done that for 30 years. So I feel like in providing information about 5310 and acting as a mobility manager, I can be an effective resource and can also sort of represent some historical context in terms of mobility management in 5310, and I've worked through a whole bunch of different sort of iterations of the 5310 program and styles of the grant proposals and different things like that. And so and with that, again, I've been acting as a sub-regional mobility manager for about 9 years, and we're intending to apply again to do mobility management for the year moving forward. So we're hopeful about that and feel like it's been really effective. One of my major projects that I've worked on and that I teach about is really resource sharing, vehicle sharing, and we've developed an entire program for doing that. And so I do trainings on that as well, and we will be touching on that some today, along with some other topics as well. So again, I see we have a small group, so I really prefer any of these trainings that I do to be really more of an open discussion format. In the old pre-COVID days, when all trainings were live, it was really a lot easier to sort of create some dialogue and keep it going and interact in that way when you're sitting across the table from each other. So please, I ask anybody, if you have questions about me, questions about what information I'm showing you, thoughts or ideas that you want to share, things that you don't agree with me about, I'm really okay with that. I really would encourage the dialogue. So, and this, like I said, this isn't really about just teaching. This is about really having a conversation. So the last thing about it too, really, this whole idea of it's a moving target, this all really started during COVID. And this training that I'm doing just sort of is in a continuous state of evolution, I guess, in that usually I wait till a few weeks or a month before the training starts before I even really decide what's going to be on the agenda, and usually kind of look for things that are, first and foremost in, on all of our minds as business people. And so that's sort of how this rolls. So if you go to this training from once and then you go again, you're probably going to see something different. And so again, ask me questions for sure, share stories, share issues or ideas. So next slide, please. So here's some of the things we'll talk about today. A little bit about personnel and recruitment. going to talk a little bit about DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then also the use of pronouns in business. And then we're also going to talk about new vehicle disposal guidelines. So we're sort of covering a lot of material in not really that long of an amount of time, but I think there should be plenty of time. And if you have any questions, again, please let me know. In terms of the vehicle disposal guidelines, that's all something that's sort of a continuing item that I've had on my agenda. Like I was saying before, I really am a big advocate of resource sharing and vehicle sharing, and I've always seen vehicle disposals, the process for disposing of vehicles as being really an aspect of sharing vehicles. And any one of us that have been 5310 providers for any period of time, we all know that it sometimes feels like keeping your vehicle, even though you don't need it, is easier than actually disposing of it because of all the red tape and the processes that you have to follow to meet the guidelines, which are federal guidelines. So with that, a project that I've worked on for a few years now has been really working with the city of Phoenix and kind of simplifying and operationalizing the vehicle disposal guidelines. So I'm going to be sharing that today, and we can talk about that and sort of see where you're at as an agency, whether you have vehicles that you need to either dispose of or to buy if somebody else is getting rid of it, or borrow if you're interested in vehicle sharing too. DEI, again, is really diversity, equity, inclusion, and the whole idea of how pronouns fit into business and how the use of pronouns sort of really matches what we do as providers in terms of, the kind of the groups of people that we work with and the policies that we have for DEI and how the use of pronouns sort of fits into all of that. Personnel and recruitment, again, that just really touches on any kind of ideas and challenges that I think probably all of us have. I know our organization has had issues with personnel and recruitment, really for a very long time, but most notably since COVID. It has been the most difficult. So that's kind of an idea of the agenda items we're going to talk about. So if we want to go to the next slide, we have a polling question for you. So if you could fill that one out, then we'll go from there.
So it looks like everyone on here is a 5310 partner agency. So I will go ahead and launch the next one, which
Excellent.
is the question that's on the screen.
Thanks, Lauren. Medium serious 25. Okay. thank you for that. So, it's always kind of nice to get an idea from other service providers, you know, sort of what your staffing situation is. And I feel like that always helps me to kind of give me an idea of where providers other than us stand in terms of staffing situations. And as you saw, serious 75%, medium 25%. So that's really helpful to know. So let's move on to the next slide, and then the slide after that. And I think there's another polling question. Okay. That's also really helpful too, as you probably all saw, 75% ZipRecruiter, Indeed, or other publications, kind of stuff that we usually have to pay for. That seems to be where people tend to go. And then website, that's really nice to see. You know, we put stuff out on our website, we do word of mouth, we have bus wraps, or, you know, signs on our vehicles, magnetic signs on our vehicles that we use. We have social media, Facebook page, and we talk about that. And we've used some other methods as well. You know, referral bonuses and different things like that to try to get the word out by word of mouth. So it's good to see those results. So next slide, please. Cool, thanks, Lauren. And then the one after that. So one of the things that I learned recently, that I attended a training and I got some information from a consultant that has worked with our organization before on a number of different things. And he had a whole bunch of slides on women in the workforce, and kind of, which I thought was very interesting and very enlightening, and kind of gave me an idea of, you know, how it could help, you know, in terms of, you know, who we target and how we target them in terms of looking for direct support professionals. So again, 74% of DSPs are female in the United States. And you can read the rest. I don't need to read it to you, but I thought that was one point that was really interesting. And if you go to the next slide, looking at women in the trucking industry, 12% of truck drivers are women, 43% of dispatchers are women, and 31.6% are trucking executives. So if you kind of look at this, you know, in terms of what the trucking industry was maybe 50 or 60 years ago, it's much different. You know, a lot more women are involved in the trucking industry than there used to be. I don't have statistics for 50 years ago, but I feel pretty certain that there were a lot less women in the trucking industry. And so, you know, if you just kind of look at that in terms of where women go to work, and this is just one example. So the trucking industry. So if we go to the next slide, we're also talking about women that are joining the military. So before Vietnam, which that was in the late 60s and early 70s. 2% of military members were women, but that has exploded to 19% in active duty ranks today. So if you kind of look at that again, these are potential people that could be direct support professionals, considering that 74% of DSPs are women. So, so this again is another example of how that statistic has changed. So next slide. Women in college. Okay. In academic year 2021, women made up an all-time high of 59.5% of college students, while men trailed at 40.5%. Okay, so that gap has been changing. And the disparity, it says the disparity will rise to 66% of college graduates will be women to 33% men. I believe that. I don't know where Douglas Shapiro got that exact information, but I'm sure he's just looking at it statistically and how it's changed. So again, so if you look at the next slide too, and this is not a survey question, but it's a thing that's sort of really worth pondering, and looking at when you have people that work as DSPs, how many of them are college educated people that identify as female, and how many people are not college educated or have no college. And it's usually a pretty high percentage of people that work as DSPs that have chosen not to go to college or have some college, but have not graduated college. And so if you kind of look at that and think, okay, so we have people that identify as female in the trucking industry, in the military, in college. Okay, next page. Okay, Hispanic women make up the fastest growing segment and have more than double. Black female direct care workers increased by 60%. Immigrants account for at least 1 in 4 DSPs in the US, most of whom are women of color. Percent of immigrant workers is almost certainly higher, given how difficult it is to count undocumented immigrants who get hired off the books. So this is all information from UCP, which was a really interesting resource that I thought that I found and thought, start looking at. We've spent so much time looking for employees in our organization that we start to look at those statistics and really try to make some sense of what our best option is for looking for people to want to come to work for us. So okay, next slide. Okay, so the projected negative impact of a diminishing immigrant population could be 27.5% of all DSPs are immigrants. 2020 had the largest drop in non-tourist visas and new arrivals, and green cards granted in 25 years. So as you know, especially with an election coming up, immigration and border security and issues like that are just very high, high on the list of issues that are being presented and things that are going on and things that are being challenged. And there's a lot of political push and pull, and immigration is really one of the hot button issues. And so, and the outcome of how that all happens with our election could be a real factor in how we do as service providers in finding direct support professionals to hire, whether they be female or male. And so kind of just looking at that whole immigrant population and considering how many direct support professionals statistically fall into the category of immigrants. So that presents an additional challenge. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, elder services. So then we look at elder services and think, okay, the number of Americans that are 65 and older is projected to grow from 12% to 27% by 2050. You know, a couple different things. Healthcare has improved greatly in terms of technology, you know, in terms of how to live longer, and pharmaceuticals, diet, exercise, any of those kinds of issues have created an opportunity for more elderly people to grow older, and which really means that we're going to have a higher population of older people that are needing some kind of support to continue to thrive the way that they do. And excuse me. And so the other part about that too is that people are also, there's such a movement now toward aging in place too, and we hear about this all the time, and it's very important. And aging in place has some really great benefits. One of the benefits is if a person stays more active, the chances are that they will stay healthier too. Stay healthier, they live longer, they're more involved in their community, they're aging in place oftentimes. That means they're still living in their own home with support in their own home. So with that support comes the need for people to work for them and support them, or work for organizations that support them. So it's expected the percentage of our population of working age will decrease by 15% between 2005 and 2050, while simultaneously the need for frontline workers to support people that are elderly will increase by 15%. So again, now we're looking again at a greater need for people in support positions working with elderly people, which really ends up being, it's all the same labor pool when you start looking at, you know, people that work with people with disabilities, people that work with people with serious mental illness and case management, and people with developmental disabilities, and all of that kind of information. So it becomes this really the same labor pool. So look at the next page, please. So again, like I was talking about, assisted living, home health, long-term care, and in-home chore services. So, you know, being involved in 5310, we're very involved in transportation, as you know, and we're always looking at solutions for people that are elderly or people that have disabilities to be able to be as independent as they can and to be able to access their community. And so, and in doing that, that independence could mean that they're in assisted living, or they're just receiving home health care services or rehabilitation services in their home. They could be involved in long-term care services, depending on the degree of their needs, or just in-home chore services, Meals on Wheels, house cleaning services, housekeeping services, different things like that. So all of those things require people that provide those services, and many of them are people that would possibly also be a direct support professional. So okay, next page. Okay, as I mentioned before, we are drawing from the same labor pool. So if we start looking at that and say, you know, it used to be at one point that it was like, okay, you know, more women are direct support professionals than people that identify as male. But there's all these different places where a person can go if they're interested in caregiving at that level, you know. But there's also a lot of other things they can do, like if they want to go to college, they want to join the military, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of work out there, and our unemployment rate is very low right now. But what goes along with that is then people have more options to choose where they want to where they want to live and where they want to work. And so you go to the next slide, please, Lauren. So then look at that as additional recruitment challenges, the great layoff, and that's really the whole idea of COVID came and lots of people stopped working or they shifted the way that they work. And that was known as the great layoff. And so, and what has really happened is, and we all probably know somebody, or we all had some period of time when we probably couldn't work in the same way that we were working because this pandemic is going on, and there's this incredible risk going on. And so we all start sort of pivoting. And as a country, we did a great job pivoting. We really pivoted effectively, and we got a lot of stuff done, and we kept our businesses running. And the federal government supported and helped us in different ways to do that. And then what happened was that the pandemic started to really ease up. And we probably also know some people that just said, I just don't like working at home. I want to get back to work, and I appreciate the relationships that I have with other people and my coworkers and the whole team thing, you know. And a lot of people fit into that category, but then there was also a lot of other people that said, well, I've gotten used to working remotely. I don't have to think about childcare in the same way now. I can work from home now. I've sort of been able to pivot, and I've got some new opportunities now that are a result of the time that I had off, and I really like this more now. And I have other ways that I can get along. I can become a care provider myself and have people in my home, or I can work remotely or do something on the phone or on Zoom or some kind of thing like that. And as we know, for the most part, being a direct support professional is kind of hard to do remotely. To some degree, you certainly can. And if you have clients, people that you work with, that that is an effective way of communicating, there's some possibilities there. But when it comes down to it, the large bulk of jobs doing direct support are something that you do live, something that you have to do in person, whether it be sitting with somebody and assisting them in solving a problem, or working on some kind of challenge, taking them out into the community and teaching them to access transportation or access their community. Those things are all things that sometimes you can do it virtually, but most often it has to be done live. And so when you start looking at that, and so that creates an additional recruitment challenge. You have less people that have a need to do the kind of work that you need them to do. They found other options. Cost, that kind of goes along with it. It costs money to work, especially if a person has family and they have childcare concerns and different things like that. There's competitiveness, which we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, in terms of how many different places can a person that does direct support, that acts as a direct support professional, work? How many different industries, how many different employers could they work for and make, relatively the same kind of money, but maybe have different kinds of flexibility in their schedule, whether it be elder care, whether it be in-home services, whether it be developmental disabilities, serious mental illness, homeless populations, different things like that. So there's that competitive. There's also generational priorities, which I'm a baby boomer. I've had like 2 careers in my life. I was a machinist And when I couldn't get a job as a machinist, I got into developmental disabilities in 1983 and realized that that was something that really I never thought would resonate with me, but I'm 65 and I still enjoy doing it, and I probably will retire doing this. So, so the whole idea about generational priorities is when you're from a generation like mine, statistically, people have less changes in their careers, whereas a lot of the younger generations or the newer generations, the Gen Z and other generations, will statistically have 6 different careers maybe in their lifetime. So there's a lot more curiosity there. There's a lot more change in what people's priorities are. And so looking for people to really invest themselves in the kind of work that we provide is not as easy to do as it once was in terms from a generational standpoint. And then remote work since COVID, we already talked about that. So next slide. And there's a polling question. Great. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to assume that the unshores are split, which means 50-50. In terms of offer, sign-on or referral bonuses, and whether maybe you just offer a sign-on, but you don't offer a referral, et cetera, that's all okay. Just trying to get an idea for myself, and to be able to have you see, sort of where people stand as organizations in terms of offering those kind of incentives and whether or not they make a difference in your hiring. All right, next slide, please. Okay, building the recruitment pool, advertising, social media, simplified application process. That's something that we have really talked about with a lot of people, and have been to some trainings, and people really talk about, again, sort of back in my day, you went to a place, you picked up an application, you took it home, you filled it out, you made copies of it, you brought it in, you waited while they looked at it, then you had an interview, and sometimes you had a second interview, and in the meantime you just wait, and our society is not so much like that as it once was, that so many things happen so much more quickly, and references can be accessed electronically and applications can be accessed electronically. So we've really looked at an organization of simplifying our process, because anymore, and certainly myself included, you get, when you have technology, you get used to expecting results a lot more quickly than you once needed to. And so we have really worked on simplifying our application process, and also sort of accelerating that process as well. Somebody actually walks in the door and is interested in a job, we'll usually interview them right away and then give them an application, for example, and then work with them, and also try to, take them around and see maybe our day program and how it's working, to kind of give them an idea, this is the kind of work that we do, this is the kind of thing that you would be involved in if we were to hire you, and kind of really looking at, giving people a sort of eyes open opportunity to really see the kind of work they're going to do, how soon that they can do it, obviously how much money they're going to make, what kind of flexibility they'll have in their schedule, what they are interested in and doing, and what kind of personality that they have, and of course what kind of experience do they already have as well. So that's something I think that can really help to build the recruitment tool. Demographic targeting is another thing that we've really looked at. Obviously I've talked a whole lot about both women and immigrant populations and people of color, and sort of statistically where they fall into, how they fit into the makeup of DSP demographics. And so really sometimes looking at different communities of people and maybe targeting your advertising toward that, whether they be people of color or LGBTQ people, or people even in different demographics in terms of how close they are to your place of business. So really looking at any of those demographics and really targeting those demographics in looking at how you reach out to people and what kind of outreach you do and how focused you are. I know, like on Facebook, you can advertise, and you can advertise in a certain area, certain number of miles from your organization, and really focus your advertising, for example. Or we also worked, and I won't go into a bunch of detail, but we worked for a company also, or we had a company working for us also, that did they accessed satellite demographic information on any kind of information that was open source information on people. And they actually were able to target groups of people according to those types of demographics, which we selected, and then they got sent out electronically. We thought that was going to be the answer for us. And surprisingly, it turned out to not yield us what we had hoped it would. And so we no longer do that. But I still think it's interesting, and that company still would like to work with us in the future. And so we'll continue to look at that. So electronic outreach, same idea. How do you get information out to people, whether it be through text messages, emails, website, social media, any of that. And then, of course, sign on or referral bonuses, which we already talked about. Okay, next slide. And before I go on, again, I think Lauren's watching, but I'm not. So if you have questions and you want to raise your hand or you want to just chime in, that's totally fine. I'm all about that. So please don't hesitate. Okay. Yeah, you hired somebody. How do we get them to stay? We kind of know that in the kind of work that we do, statistically, if you look at statistic and you look at surveys for people, it's not typically just about the amount of money that people make. Everybody needs to survive, obviously. But there's a lot of different ways to make just above minimum wage anymore. And some of those ways really involve a lower degree of liability, a lower degree of risk. When you're working with people in an agency like ours, you're working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, many of whom have behavioral challenges, have health challenges, they have medications that they need to make sure that they take. And, they have family contact, and they have, there's just all kinds of personality traits that it takes a creative person, it takes a dedicated person, and it takes a person that is really paying attention to what they're doing, who they're working with, and really have that kind of dedication. People that to the people that they're talking about. So th there's a lot to that. And so in terms of what we look at oftentimes is not just how to get people in the door, but to get them hired and how to inspire them to want to stay. Looking really at the big picture of your organization. What are we really about? How can we best educate somebody and give them an idea of the fact that the program members that they're serving are at the center of everything that we do. If those folks were not here, our organization would not exist. It's really all about you supporting them and helping them to make um, a, a life that is what they want it to be and to experience self-determination. Um, Upward mobility. Some people come into organizations looking to move up in the company. Um, Whereas there's other people that don't really care about that would rather stay in a position that they're in. They kind of have a comfort level with that. And so we try to look at each one of those people and determine what is your interest? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 1 year? And oftentimes we'll find people that are, we have direct support professionals that have worked with us for 20 years as a DSP, and that's what they like. And then we have other people that come in and say, I want to learn as much as I can. I want to be a manager. I want to be a coordinator. I want to be a director, things like that. And so we really look at each individual person's upward mobility, their skill sets, their interest, and we have a tuition reimbursement program if somebody wants to get additional education to help them to sort of be upwardly mobile. And we always open up advancement opportunities to people within the organization first, and always advertise in-house for those kinds of opportunities. How to get them to stay, create a DSP community. And really what that means is that oftentimes, and you find this more within day program settings. And the reason being really is that you have a day program, and our day program is out of the building more than they're in the building. However, there's a number of staff that are working with a number of program members, and they all get to know each other and they all support each other. And they see themselves as more of a family or more of a community. People that work in community living services, our houses have, no house has more than 4 people living in it, and usually have a couple of staff, and they're not, oftentimes staff are never together at the same time. And so they don't have the same opportunity to have community. So oftentimes what will happen is the managers of those houses will plan get-togethers with other managers, with other homes, with other program members, with other staff, so that people can sort of interact and support each other and create that community. And we find that any kind of opportunities toward community that come up really seem to strengthen the sort of resiliency and the sense of community among our staff. And so we're always kind of looking at that as ways to really inspire people to want to stay. So of course, listen to people, listen to what they have to say, listen to what their opinions are, listen to what they want, what ideas they have, different things like that. And kind of really respect people and their challenges, their way of doing their job, their lifestyle, and different things like that. And really, again, looking at why we're all here. We're all here to support the people that we are working with. So next slide, please. Survey question. 50-50. Wow. Terrific. Thank you for that. So it's 50-50. And I think I understand too, and I'm going to take a stab at it and guess that maybe at least some of the organizations that are represented here today have people that are not exclusively drivers, but they're usually professionals that work with um, their clientele, which includes driving, but they're not just a dedicated driver. And so I think that that makes a difference, you know, in terms of driving and in terms to of the amount of driving a person does. A lot of the ideas and things that we see from community transportation of America and different ideas actually oftentimes talk about sort of incentive programs for people that are exclusively drivers. But I think also realizing that many of the folks that we work with, I think we have one person in our agency out of 140 staff that is just a driver, and they're actually a volunteer driver. I think so. Everybody else are DSPs that also drive, and so we oftentimes kind of look at that and in terms of pay differentials. But the other thing we look at too is that because our mission so focuses on community access, that we really want to recognize people that are able to drive our vehicles and make sure people get to access the community, or people that if they're not able to drive are willing and also have some savvy in using public transportation, because really it's about community access. So thank you for that survey information. That's really helpful to know. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, driver retention. This is from CTAA, Community Transportation Association of America. Dee Dee and Ezekias, I think, went to this and brought back a lot of this information on improving driver retention. And I'm just going to buzz through some of the topics that were identified. And one was policies. So looking at your driving policies, looking at the work environment, just focusing on what a person's work environment is as a driver. What kind of support do they get from a dispatcher? I think we have certainly found that to be an important aspect of our organization, particularly with our day service program, because we have all these people that are coming in from all over the place, whether they be from an adult developmental home or their family home or a group home or all kinds of different places, and have all kinds of different challenges with schedules and whose family they might want to drop them off at our program one day or pick them up one day, but they want us to come and get them at on another certain day and different things like that. We also have parameters. You know, we have sort of a catchment area for driving that where we will pick people up, and so we're always working with families, most often with families, to sort of coordinate a schedule that works for picking someone up, and then also making sure that when somebody gets dropped off, they get door-to-door service, so that when they, you know, we never leave until we know a person has been successfully received at their drop-off point and different things like that. And then schedules change all the time. And so that can be really a challenge for a driver who already has a vehicle load of people, and then they show up at somebody's house and they're not there. Then what do? You know, so that kind of support from a dispatcher is really important in many ways. And so we make sure that we have a person that acts as dispatcher every day, Monday through Friday during the time the day program happens, so that there could be no questions or any kind of issue that could come up actually comes up. And we have policies that speak to driving, but also speak to things like pickups and drop-offs and how we actually manage those things. And we have a whole fleet services manual in the vehicle that tells you what to do for pickups and drop-offs, or for vehicle breakdown and different things like that. So another thing that was suggested was a driver feedback process. So it's the whole idea of giving drivers a voice to be able to say, this is how we think driving could be better. And this is how we think the organization could better run from a driving perspective. And, you know, having sort of a feedback loop for that, or even, you know, an advisory committee for driving and different things like that. Again, our organization, people work mostly 80+% of their time they're not driving, but then they're also doing door-to-door driving in the mornings and the afternoons, or one or the other, or both sometimes, and then taking people out in the community. So, okay, next slide. Driver retention, another thing is define if there's a monetary benefit for the mentors. So if you have a mentor program, and you have an experienced person that kind of goes along with a new driver to kind of help give them the ropes and help them out. You know, they're asking if a person acts as a mentor, is there some kind of a benefit to them for being a mentor? A driver advisory committee, whether drivers want to get together and form their own committee, have a purpose of their committee, a mission of their committee, and then how their recommendations will be reviewed by management of the program that they work for. Okay, next slide, and it's a survey question again. Thank you for the answer to that. I think the next time I do this, if I use that question again, I'm going to give it a little bit more detail too, because people probably interpreted that question as, do they get bonuses for excellent driving records? In our organization, people don't. Do they get recognized? Sometimes, but probably not as often as they should. And so I appreciate the answers to that. And we want to go to the next slide. Okay, training and development for drivers, professional development as a reward. Giving people opportunities to attend trainings or develop professionally, and as a reward, dedicate budget on your operating plan. Standard is minimum of 2% of salary, about 40 hours annually. So, I mean, that's looking at somebody who driving is their primary part of their job. Can you provide, or it's suggesting that organizations consider providing 40 hours of training or continuing education relating to driving um, as a professional training and development opportunity. So I think that's interesting, and I think it's a great idea. And we can go to the next slide too. Okay, rewards and recognition. How do people do with attendance, peer recognition? If you know somebody, we have had like a way to go program within our organization. If you're an employee and you see another employee do something that is exemplary, we organizations tend to focus on the negative. You see somebody doing something wrong or breaking a policy, you let somebody know, which is appropriate and understandable, but oftentimes we don't think of just, tossing a way to go to somebody else about something that they did that was, above and beyond the call of duty A, B, C, D. Also looking at years of service for a person that acts as a driver, and driver of the year. I know that within the 5310 program and within mobility management, we oftentimes talk about, how to, solicit nominations for people as exemplary drivers or as exemplary employees, so that they can be recognized among their peers. And so that kind of stuff is really important. And again, we're going way back about 10 slides to talking about having a community of people. People feel like more like a community if they're interacting in that way and they're being recognized by their peers, much more than if they're being recognized by management.
And I would add to that, Mag has a driver of the quarter and years of service recognition that you all can nominate someone at your agency for. It goes in our newsletter, have a nice article, picture of them, and then they get recognized at our Transportation Ambassador Program meetings as well. So that would be another way to do that for your employees.
Excellent, Lauren. Thank you. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, we talked a little bit before about pronouns and how people use pronouns as identifiers. Anybody that gets an email from me will notice that on my signature line on my email, I include my pronouns. I sometimes introduce myself using my pronouns, but I'm still really getting used to that. I'm a complete advocate for it. I think it's really important. And I think when we look at the kind of work we do, and we look at the fact that most, if not all of us, are working with some kind of a marginalized community, whether it's people with serious mental illness, people that have developmental disabilities, maybe people that are homeless, different things like that. Service organizations oftentimes work with marginalized people. People that use identifiers according to their pronouns are people that are part of the LGBTQ community, oftentimes identify themselves using their pronouns, and people can really be open to both criticism and both discrimination. And so, in kind of looking at the way that we treat the clients that we work with, and then kind of taking that same thing and looking at our community in general and our friends and neighbors and parts of our community. And so that's why I really like to include this section of the training in this. And so if we want to go to the next slide, Lauren, there's a little YouTube clip. If you can start that, that would be really great.
Absolutely. It'll be just a second.
Thank you.
they and them as my pronouns. And when someone uses they and them as my pronouns, I feel like that person is listening to me. That person cares about me, and that person wants to have a conversation with me. Pronouns are a fascinating part of modern culture. I don't think many people think about them very often until someone like myself or others say their pronouns. So when I introduce myself, I generally say, "Hi, my name's Sam Britton. I use they and them as my pronouns, and I serve as head of advocacy and government affairs for the Trevor Project." I give this before I even give my job because it's the important way that you're going to describe me. Not what I do, but who I am. And that respect for my gender is really, really important. I think our culture has built itself around an idea that the faster I can learn something about you, the faster I can interact with you. We are a system of speed. And pronouns sometimes slow that down, right? Like, the assumption makes things easier. We are, every single time we meet someone, immediately putting some type of judgment on them really quickly so we know how to interact with them. But that judgment could be wrong. And so I think the hard part is to change perspective. Now, this isn't asking you to run a marathon. This is you saying that you want to be respected in a specific way, and I can do that for you by using a pronoun. Things that companies and schools can do are, on the first day of classes, and for maybe the first week, having a sticker where you tell people, "Hi, my name is Sam, my pronouns are they and them." It's also really important to recognize that pronouns change sometimes. Many of us will not always have the same pronouns because our gender is changing or our gender realization has changed. I think that's really, really important for us to say that the flexibility of your personality should be something that we can respect, and the flexibility of your gender identity is something that we can respect. Pronouns are confusing. I'm not going to say that they're not. But if I can have the President of the United States use my gender-neutral pronouns, and I can respectfully use theirs, then I think we're going to be in a world where everyone can be respected and everyone has the responsibility to be respectful.
Good deal. Thank you for showing that, Lauren. I appreciate it. I think that's I think that the person that does that video is just really able to sort of really encapsulate that so well, and really kind of look at it. And as people, I just feel like change is never really easy. It always comes with an adjustment period, a transition time. And I feel like as a community, we're in that transition right now. And, you know, if I look back on other similar issues that have come up, gay marriage for sure, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, that was a really an issue of a lot of challenge, and a lot of discrimination was going on, and it was created all kinds of backlash from different communities and things like that. We really don't hear about that anymore, because people have settled into it, and they realize that some people that they interact with regularly sort of fit into that category, and they realize that they're just people that are just like them, and different things like that. And so I think we're in a time of adjustment to that. And I feel like us as being human service providers, we have a unique opportunity to sort of really lead that, lead that change and lead that, community of acceptance among, people that use pronouns as identifiers and that fit into certain categories. And so I think it's really important. Again, why is it important? It's a window into how people would like to be addressed. It's inclusivity, it's respect. Plus, we need employees, and there's lots of potential employees out there that could be working for our organization, that maybe are someone who is transgender or someone who is non-binary, and they identify in different pronouns, and could be somebody who could be an important part of our organization, a really strong advocate for the people that we support. And so and then from a community relations perspective, when you're an organization that works with marginalized communities, having a policy that supports diversity in that way is really important. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the arc of the United States, their position. And I condensed it. It's much longer than this, but it's important to respect the way people prefer to be identified. In most circumstances, person first language is most appropriate. However, some people prefer identity first language, e.g., autistic person. And so we've come up, with all the change that I've seen in developmental disability since 1983, and there's been a ton. Obviously, person first language has been around for a long time. So anybody that doesn't know what that is, that means you always refer to the person first and their disability second. So a person with autism, a person with an intellectual or developmental disability, et cetera, et cetera. But that is now beginning to change too, to where we're really looking at each individual person and what they actually want. Okay, I have autism. I'm not saying that for me, but if a person was to say, I have autism, I want you to refer to me as an autistic person. You don't have to say I'm a person with autism. It's my choice. And so really looking at taking the whole idea of self-determination and choice one step further, and giving a person the opportunity to tell you how they want to be referred, how they would like for you to identify them. And so, again, that really sort of falls into what we're talking about in terms of pronouns. And it says, of course, in addition, people's self-identified pronouns for gender identity must also be respected. So a person with an intellectual or developmental disability, if the person wants to be identified according to the entire community of people anywhere we are in the same way. So, so really that's that section. And if you want to go to the next slide, there's a polling question. Yes, I'm sure. Okay. Great. 50. Terrific. Thank you. Okay, next slide. Okay, diversity is embracing the richest of different backgrounds, identities, abilities, life experiences, belief, and perspective. Equity, ensuring people have the resources they need to access the same opportunities. Inclusion, fostering a sense of belonging and encouraging authentic and full engagement. And inclusion also means bringing traditionally excluded individuals and groups into processes, activities, and decision-making. That part means a lot to me, probably because I've been in the field that I'm in for so long, and the degree of community engagement and involvement that we see with the people that we serve in our organization is completely different than it was in 1983. We have people that are volunteering in the community all the time. We had somebody for a few years that was a person that we served in an organization that was actually a part of our board of directors, and really giving people the opportunity that they would have been excluded in the past. And so, and of course, in doing that, I've seen through the years that the degree of challenges that we have as a service provider with people and any kind of issues that they have been so much less because they feel like they're part of the community. And so all of those things I think are really important. And next slide, please. Okay, the word marginalized has come a long way from its original definition. Today, it refers to the act of treating a person or a group as though they are insignificant by isolating or disempowering them. Okay, marginalized groups, women, people with disabilities, people of color, LGBTQ plus folks, indigenous peoples, and people of lower socioeconomic status, and so on. So as you can see, that's a pretty broad definition when you start looking at marginalization. Okay, next slide. How can we help? Do we already work with a marginalized group? Yes, we do at least. You probably do too. How do you support caring and inclusiveness as a professional, thinking about your DEI principles, and then also looking at it yourself? What if you were unable to choose how you wanted to be identified? My name is William. I go by Billy. Everybody knows me as Billy. But if all of a sudden I couldn't be referred to as Billy, everybody said, I'm not going to call you that. Your name is William. That's what you get. You're going to be William. I would feel like I was marginalized. I would feel like that was an opportunity. That was a way that I chose to identify myself, and it's not being supported by the environment around me. So just kind of looking at that. And, as I mentioned before, a lot of these things are just adjustments in our way of doing business that are really important and are coming whether we like them or not, really. And or something that will just end up getting adjusted to, and it will become normalized as other issues, similar issues have become. So, and there is a polling question on the next slide. Thanks, Lauren. Wow. Thanks for the answer. That's the first time I've gotten 100% on that, so that's really encouraging to see that. And to know that, that's something that's already being identified within your organization. That means that it's really kind of, your organization or the culture of your organization is being supportive of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it really says something about sort of the popularity of DEI and all of that stuff sort of really coming into being more part of contemporary business practices. So that is that's really great. So thank you for that answer. Does anybody have any additional questions of anything that we've talked about so far?
I would just like to add on the recruitment and retention note that we do have a hiring and retention focus group next week if anyone is interested in attending that.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Okay, next slide. And then the slide after that, there is a polling question. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm glad to know that some people have been through the disposal process. I was a yes on that one. We, in the process of working with Wendy Miller to sort of update the disposal guidelines, we were disposing of a bunch of, well, not a bunch, I think 8 vehicles that we had from long time ago through ADOT that we've been sort of hanging on to and sort of, wrapping duct tape around to keep them going and all that kind of stuff, but still using. And so in the process of doing that, I was able to kind of take the interactions that I had with people with ADOT and with Wendy and kind of, work through the process and kind of, if I could make it work for me, then maybe I could, support others in sort of making it work. So, so it sounds like half of the people in this training have 5310 vehicles that are available for disposal. So that means you have vehicles that someone else can probably use more than you. So I really would encourage you to sort of follow along with this part of the training, and also contact me if I can support you in any way in getting rid of vehicles. There's 2 ways to do it. Really looking at whether or not the vehicles have come through the city of Phoenix. So that would be like the last 10 years, I think, or whether they came through ADOT, which would have been older than that. There's different processes. One of the things that we're working on is trying to get one process that works for both ADOT vehicles and City of Phoenix vehicles. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's part of the project. So next slide, please. Okay, disposal as a collaboration tool. So really, again, I do a lot of training on vehicle sharing and on resource sharing, and I really see disposal as a way for us to collaborate with other people. I have a vehicle, I don't really need it. You really need a vehicle. I want to get my vehicle to you somehow. Whether I sell it to you, whether I give it to you, there's all kinds of different options that you have. There's different types of disposals, there's different guidelines. And again, like I said, the procedures above, and Lauren, if you want to click that link just to open it, we don't have to get too far into it, but just to give you, people can kind of get an eye on what it looks like. Okay, as you can see, it was revised April 25th, 2023, and I believe that document is on the MAG website.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So you can look at it on there. That is the most recent document. And Lauren, if you want to just page down, you can see that it is numerous pages, and it has really a lot of details, and there's been a lot of change to it. And I really shout out to Wendy Miller for her support in helping to make those changes. And I've spoken to people that have gone through the disposal process, and they're feeling like it's much more doable than it used to be. And so that's a really positive thing, and I'm really happy to hear that. So you can close that now, Lauren. Thank you. So those are the procedures. And so again, I'll go to the next slide, please. So looking at disposing of vehicles, oftentimes the question useful life, it's either defined in years of service or mileage. Minivans and passenger vans must be at least 4 years or 100,000 miles. Raised roofs and cutaways, 5 years or 150,000 miles. So that's one of the categorical items that you look at in determining how to dispose of a vehicle. And in most cases, you want them to really have used up their useful life, although it's not absolutely vital. There are other options too, if it has not met its useful life. So, okay, next page. So, you know what useful life means? Now, there are, according to the FTA, there's 4 things you can do with vehicles that have reached their useful life. You can retain and use them for other transit projects. You can transfer them to another grantee, sell them, or buy out the federal interest. So retain and use for other transit projects is you can keep them in your organization and just repurpose that vehicle. It's still your vehicle. It's still being used. You know, the City of Phoenix still has their name on the title at this point if you keep the vehicle. You can also transfer them to another 5310 grantee. And the last time I checked, no one had ever really done that, but it is something that can be done. And there's a whole bunch of steps to it. You have to get your board of directors involved and different things like that, but it is an option that you have. So for example, if somebody came to me, we don't have any vehicles to get rid of right now, but if we did, and another 5310 provider came to me and said, we really need a vehicle, I could transfer that to you. And transfer it means I could give it to you, and I think it also means I could sell it to you. So that's another thing. Another option that you have is you can buy out the federal interest. And so there's a certain number, and I believe it's $5,000. And Lauren, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's $5,000 of federal interest. If your vehicle is appraised at more than $5,000, and you sell it, then a percentage of the money over $5,000 you have to return to the FTA. Now, if you have a vehicle that's worth $8,000 according to an appraisal, and you want to keep the vehicle, but you want to take it off the 5310 rolls, you can buy out the $3,000 by paying the FTA for the federal interest. And then the title gets given to you, and now it's my vehicle, and it's no longer a 5310 asset. So that's another disposal option, because then it becomes your vehicle. Now you can sell it for whatever you want, or you can keep it, and it goes off of the rolls as a 5310 asset. That's another one that I'm not aware of anyone that's actually done that, but it is in the procedures, and it's something that can be done. Okay, next slide. Okay, if you're going to share, if you're going to sell a vehicle, it has to be open to the public, and it has to be sold for the highest possible return, and it has to be based on fair market value. So if you have an agency website, if you have a Facebook page, and you're selling a vehicle, if you put it on those, that's considered open to the public. If you want to put it on the newspaper, if you want to put it on Auto Trader, any of that stuff also counts. But at the minimum, if you put it on your website and or you put it on your Facebook page, that also fits into that category. Sold for the highest possible return. A lot of times that you have to really look at what the vehicle is appraising at and what people are offering, and then to determine whether or not that you will have the option to actually sell the vehicle, and whether the sale is based on the fair market value of the vehicle, which can be determined in different ways. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. The other option you have that some people I know do, you can sell them at auction, and you can use third-party private dealers if the subrecipient has a written contract with the auction company and the vehicle sold at the highest possible return. So what that means is that if I have a vehicle that's a 5310 asset, and I don't want to go and get a bunch of appraisals, I don't want to do any of that stuff, and I have a relationship in writing with an auction company that's recognized by the city of Phoenix, which there are some, I can take my vehicle to that auction company, pay them whatever percentage that they expect out of the sale, and they can sell it at whatever they get for it, and I'll get whatever I get. And that becomes the highest possible return, because that's maybe the only offer they get, or it's the high bid. So, and it's not so tied to an appraisal for the vehicle, it's just however much somebody wants to pay. Obviously, the downside of an auction is you have to pay the auction site for the vehicle to be sold. If the vehicle goes up for auction and it doesn't sell, you have to go back and get it. You have to take it back, et cetera, et cetera. So there can be definitely some downsides to that. We have not tried it, but we're open to it. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about the federal interest. If the vehicle's worth more than $5,000, there's a federal interest to be reimbursed to the FTA. But if I donate my vehicle to another 5310 organization, then the federal interest goes along with that vehicle, so that there's no obligation to reimburse FTA, because now the ownership of the vehicle and the ownership of the federal interest all goes to the new grantee, or to the new owner of the vehicle, but they have to be a 5310 program. You can't just do that with anybody. It has to be somebody that's part of the 5310 program. Another option that I don't know anyone that's used, but there may be someone out there, I'm not sure. Federal interest is transferred to no obligation to reimburse FTA. No additional FTA funds may be used to acquire the vehicles. So, and it has to be coordinated with the city of Phoenix, and that part is huge. There is an entire flow chart that Zacchaeus, who used to work for Meg, and I worked on together, and then Lauren has kind of also taken that chart and expanded it into a 2-page document, and we've been working on that together. And it really kind of gives all the scenarios. It's like a giant octopus in terms of the amount of different ways you have to look at vehicles depending on, you know, what the fair market value is, you know, whether it's a City of Phoenix vehicle, whether it has a lift, whether it doesn't have a lift, whether it's met its useful life, whether it hasn't, you know, different things like that. And so there are tentacles that go all over on that, but the spreadsheet follows it very well. So that's something that could be available to any one of you. And I'm going to guess that if that's not already on the MAG website, it will be when it's become finalized.
The version that you and Hezekias worked on is on there, and then we will update it once you and I are finished with the new one.
Fantastic, thank you. But I can't say more about coordinating with the City of Phoenix. And if you look through not just the flow sheet that we're referring to, but also the policy that I showed you a little while ago, you'll see that there are the City of Phoenix will do a lot to support you in this, and they'll help a lot with, you know, getting fair market values on vehicles and different things like that. They really go out of their way to support you in doing that. It can be a real great partner in that. And you can look at all the policies you want, and you can look at the flow chart all you want, but it really comes down to finding somebody at the City of Phoenix that will sort of help walk you through that. And then you also have me as a mobility manager with this as kind of one of my duties that I do is work with people on vehicle disposals too. And so I can be a resource to you as well. So, okay, next slide. Determining fair market value. First thing you have to do is a disposal request. Lauren, if you could open that really quickly, just so people can get an eye on it. So that's what it looks like. It's a fillable form. It's available to you. I'm sure that is also on the MAG website. And that's the first thing you do is you fill that out and you send that in. And then that kind of gives you the okay. Once you hear back from the City of Phoenix, they say, yes, you can move forward with disposing of this vehicle. But that's what you do first. So you can close it. Okay, determining fair market value, accessible vehicles. Model 1 is a company that used to be known as Arizona Bus Sales. They will now do as a service to 5310 recipients, they will do a complimentary desktop appraisal for any vehicle that you want to dispose of. So let's say you do your disposal request, somebody says, yes, it's cool for you to work on disposing that vehicle. Then you can get an appraisal through Model 1 for that vehicle. And if it's a non-accessible vehicle without repairs needed, the City of Phoenix will research Kelley Blue Book or NADA guide, and they will actually give you also an appraisal, or you can do that yourself. If your vehicle does not have modifications to it, you can look up your model of vehicle, get Kelley Blue Book on it, and then you could use that to sort of guide you in how to determine the fair market value, which will then also in turn guide you in in how to sell it. Okay, next page. Okay, non-accessible vehicles, significant repair needs. You can either get 3 as-is appraisals and send them to the city of Phoenix. You can provide 1 repair quote from a vendor from a vendor, and then the city of Phoenix researches Kelley Blue Book to determine fair market value. Average repair cost is subtracted from current fair market value. That's what we did when we sold our old ADOT vehicles. We got repair estimates for all of them, and then we sent them also to Model 1 and said, here's our repair estimates. What is this vehicle worth? And in some cases, the vehicle was worth less than the cost of the repair. And so it was kind of pretty easy for ADOT to just tell us, yeah, sell them for whatever you can get for them, because they were, they'd been used a long time. Some of them were 25 years old. Okay, or you can repair the vehicle yourself. Then you can research Kelley Blue Book or NADA and determine the fair market value, or you can take them to auction. Okay, next slide. So everything I just told you really refers to how to deal with vehicles that have been acquired through the city of Phoenix and MAG as part of the 5310 process. It's all there. And again, you can think of me as a resource for if you have an interest. I mean, I noticed that half of those surveyed on this training today have vehicles that they dispose of. If I can help you in any way, please don't hesitate to ask. It's a lot easier that way because there's just a lot of steps that a lot of that stuff can be simplified. And really it has a lot to do with how much the vehicle's worth to begin with. Is there going to be federal interest involved in it and different things like that? So there's really a lot to that. So when it comes to vehicle disposals through ADOT, there's 2 hyperlinks, and we don't have to open them. But really, the ADOT 5310 program guidebook is one of them. It's the entire 5310 book. It's big. And if you look at pages 29 through 33, it will give you an overview of the process. Now, again, the important part where it says at the bottom, work closely with ADOT staff, that's what I did, because our vehicles were so old that some of the steps on pages 29 through 33 just really were not necessary. And when we looked at the repair estimates and the cost and weighed that against the appraised value of the vehicle with the repairs, the folks at ADOT were like, don't worry about it. These vehicles are really old. You work them hard. They served you well. Get whatever you want to with them. So it really depends. That's why working with the city of Phoenix or working with ADOT is so important, because there's so many unique parts of the process that relate to the vehicles themselves, what they're worth, how many miles they have on them, et cetera, et cetera. So again, as with the city of Phoenix, the disposal request is a vital part of ADOT again, and looking at that disposal request, filling it out, figuring it out who to send it to. I know that there's some new staff on at ADOT now, and so figuring out who the right person is to send those vehicles or to send the disposal request for the vehicles. And again, when I did it, I sent it in. I got an email back saying these vehicles are approved for disposal. And then I was able to sort of move forward with that. And so again, the second link is the ADOT vehicle disposal form, which we also don't have to open because it looks exactly like the City of Phoenix one. I think it maybe says ADOT on it. And then, you know, like I said, just work closely with ADOT staff. Next slide. And ask me. I want to be able to help you do that. I believe in the whole idea of moving vehicles around to people that really need them and using this process. If you have vehicles that you want to dispose of, and either by sale, donation, whatever, I feel like I can be a resource for you and I can help. So the next slide. Bottom line, disposals can be done. Disposal is coordination and disposal is good karma. It's a positive thing to do. It is really about us really working as a community to make sure that people get the transportation that they need, and programs can function the way that they can, and resources can be used as best as possible. So next slide. Questions? I have moved my mouth a lot for the last 2 hours. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share? We have just a few minutes, but I'd love to hear anybody's opinion, any challenges you have, or anything you'd like to share.
There aren't any questions in the chat, so if you do have any, go ahead and unmute and you can ask.
The chat says it's disabled.
Oh,
That is weird because I changed it earlier.
I didn't have a question. I just was telling you that.
Okay.
darn, I thought I had a question coming.
It should be working now.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, you guys.
You bet. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. If we go to the next slide, that's my contact information. Again, I'm with Chandler-Gilbert ARC. We work with people with intellectual developmental disabilities. I'm the executive director, and I'm sub-regional mobility manager, and have been working with Lauren and also Dee Dee for a very long time, and really want to be able to support you in any of the topics that you learned about today in the training.
And again, as a reminder, if you want to learn more about hiring and retention best practices, we do have that focus group next Tuesday. So go ahead and get registered for that. And if anyone would like a certificate for attending the workshop today, please send me an email and I will get that to you today.
Terrific. Well, thanks again to Lauren for sort of managing the entire presentation and the slides and everything else. I appreciate you. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can reach me through my sub-regional mobility manager email, or you can just contact me through the agency. Either way. So with that, if there are no other questions, we can sign off. Thank you so much.